Okay, Ron, I think I have us live on both YouTube and here on Zoom, so we should be ready to go.
Great.
Okay, guys, I see that it is, sorry, just give me a second here. Okay, sorry about that. I was hearing echoing, so I had to get things shut down here on my end. So thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Jeanne Falk Jones. I'm one of the agronomists with Kansas State University, and I'm a member of the High Plains Sunflower Committee, and they are one of our sponsors for today's sunflower production webinar. Also, we have Colorado State and Kansas State University as part of this. So this is really kind of a joint effort to deliver some information to you guys on some of the latest research that we have regarding sunflower production. We're going to talk about some general sunflower production, some specific things, and then also on production, and then talk about what kind of marketing opportunities we have with sunflowers, because our market dynamics have changed a little bit over the couple of years, and so we thought we should have everyone hear what our opportunities are for marketing sunflowers. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in here. There's a couple of housekeeping things that we're going to go over before we get in very deep on our sunflower production here. So, okay, of course, now my slides aren't advancing like they should. Okay. If you would like to ask a question, we encourage you guys. This is supposed to be a learning opportunity for everybody involved. And so if you have questions, there's a couple of ways that you can get those asked. One, you can, if you're using Zoom, you can type them into the chat box down here at the bottom of your screen. And so it looks like a little cartoon blurb. And so you can click on that. The chat function will pop up and you can put your question in there. If you're using YouTube, you can type your question into the comment box. But you have to have an account made and be sent to that. Not hard to do, but you'll have to have that in order to put a comment in the comment box. Now, if all else fails, you can just email your questions to me. I'm happy to get those put into the conversation and get those asked. And honestly, guys, we have a pretty small group. You should have a function where you can raise your hand, so you can do that, or you can unmute yourselves and ask questions. We really want this to be an opportunity for everybody to learn. So with this small of a group, I think we can definitely go through the unmuting and just asking questions at the end of presentations. So with that, we'll go ahead and move to our next thing. If you are getting certified crop advisor credits, there is going to be 2 opportunities to get those credits. You'll get a half a credit at the end of the weed control section. If you are there for the sunflower production and weed control sections, you'll get a half a credit there. The QR code will be on my ending slide. And then we'll have another QR code at the end of the webinar, and that will get you the second half of credit, which will be for our marketing opportunities. A little different in the way that is structured because we had a little bit of a difference on how we got the credits applied for. So you can sure get them, but there will be QR codes to scan. If you don't want to mess with scanning QR codes, you can email me right now and when we leave with your name and your CCA number, and I will create a list and we'll send it into our CCA folks and get those credits for you. So you can do that where you either scan the codes both times, or you can just email me now and email me when you leave, and then you'll get credits that way. So either way works fine. Just know that there's 2 ways to go ahead. With that, we are not ready to thank you for joining us because we're not quite to that point yet. And why won't it stop sharing? There we go. So we are ready to switch gears and move right into our first presentation. We have Ron Meyer with us. Ron, you can go ahead and pull your slides up if you would like to. Ron is our sunflower agronomist. He spends a lot of time working on sunflowers in our area and is with Colorado State University just across the border in Burlington. And I'm sure he's getting snow right now from the pictures that I've been seeing from that area. So a good day to be inside talking about sunflowers for Ron. So with that, Ron, we can see your slides and it is in presentation mode. So you should be good to go.
Great. Hey, Jeannie, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me.
I sure can.
Okay, great. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. So appreciate everybody joining us today. And just so everyone knows, Jeannie engineered this whole thing. So she is in control. She set it up and she designed it. And thank you, Jeannie, for all your efforts. So I'll talk about production, and we'll talk about fertility and markets and insect control, and then I'm not going to talk about weed control. Jeannie will follow up with that. So with that, if anyone out there doesn't have this High Plains Sunflower Production Guide and wants one, get up in the chat, give us your physical mailing address. Jeannie and I will make sure you get one of those. They'll come to you without cost. The High Plains Sunflower Committee has paid the cost on that, and so it's really a good book. If you want one, let us know. We'll get you one. All right, so I'll talk about plant breeding just to start out with. And so there are a lot of tools out there that breeders are using, and some of those include diagnostic markers, flanking markers, polymorphic markers for candidate genes. And one of them that is very popular is called SNP technology. So that's just an acronym for single nucleotide polymorphism. It's a genetic marker technique. And essentially, it's just a variation of a single position in a DNA sequence among individuals. So these are breeder-friendly markers. And so essentially, I get questions about, okay, so that's GMO technology. The answer is no. Sunflowers do not use GMO technology. Many crops do, but sunflowers do not. And the reason is there are about 20 species of wild sunflowers out there, and that's the gene pool. So when you take a gene from within the species and transfer it to another variety, that's not GMO technology, but it is a tool that plant breeders are using. So some of the other tools you'll hear about are CRISPR, double haploid, single seed descent method, composite interval mapping. Those don't mean much to me, but a plant breeder would know exactly what you're talking about. And so those are tools that let me get my slide straight in, that are available for the breeders out there. And so just some of the new technology and genes that they're manipulating, there is red seed weevil resistance now being found in some of the wild sunflowers. They found a marker for that, and so maybe in the future, if they can get the gene transferred into our domestic sunflower varieties, maybe in the future we will have pest-resistant sunflowers. We'll see. We already have disease resistance, so downy mildew resistance is in the gene pool for commercial varieties, and so that's important for us. I'll talk a little bit about market types. So we've got essentially 4 markets out there. There's the oil market, confection market, the birdseed market, and then the con oil market. So if you're new to sunflowers, the oil market is the black oil type sunflower seeds. 40% oil is the standard. So when you drop oil sunflower seeds off to an elevator, they're going to test the oil on it. A couple of reasons for that. They need to know what that oil content is because they market according to that. And if you've got better than 40% oil, then you get a premium. If those loads have less than 40% oil, there's a slight discount on them. So that's important. On the confection market, so those include snack foods, in-shell markets, salad bar markets. You get paid on seed size. So they'll run them over a 2264 screen. And those large seeds, you get a premium for. The smaller seeds that fall below that screen, you get a little bit less money for it. So again, percent large seed in a variety is important. And some of those varieties can run 70 to 85% large seed. This is a specialty market, and so you've got to deliver quality, because if you deliver confections full of insects, the buyers may not want those. Keep that in mind. And then it's best growing confections with a contract, because you can grow them open market, but if you don't have a place to sell them, you may have to hold them for a while, and you don't need that risk. There's also the birdseed market, and so that market does not care about oil percentage. And so here, one of the strategies is if you've got low oil, birdseed may be the route to go. If you have high oil sunflower seeds, then definitely you want to go to the crush plants. They're going to pay you a premium. And then there's a con oil market that can meet both confection or oil. That's by contract only. It's a small market. And so we'll talk just a little bit about risk, but essentially all the oil and the confection and the con oil market offer contracts. And if you offer for the confection market anyway, you need to be contracted so you have a place to go with them in the fall of the year. So staying with risk, this just shows a Chicago Board of Trade market, futures market for corn. There is no Board of Trade for sunflowers. So that gives us a slight advantage because the processors offer an act of God contract. And so when you ask them about what does it entail, the answer is pretty simple. If you don't produce the crop, you don't have to deliver it. So essentially, if you get hailed out or droughted out, you've got that contract in place. You make a call and say, I can't deliver the crop, it's lost. They may send a representative out, but essentially you're out of the contract. So it's pretty simple. If you need risk protection, I would definitely inquire about an act of God contract for those sunflowers. So keep that in mind. All right, so we've got better tools today than our forefathers had. This guy's weed control tool, his seed bed prep tool, and his erosion control tool. He had tillage, and that's all he had for a tool. And this poor guy's out here trying to keep his ground from blowing away because it's not covered. And so we have wind out here. We have wind towers for a reason. The wind blows. Our average wind speed is 9 miles per hour per day. And so that means if you get a couple of days without wind, it'll make up for it. So today we've got much better tools. We've got better herbicides that can handle residue and don't need incorporation. We've got equipment that can plant and work itself into the high residue situations. There are crop rotation strategies with this crop, and then reduced tillage strategies with this crop too. So in this picture just shows an example of 2-year-old wheat stubble and 1-year-old corn stubble. This ground has no chance of leaving that area. So it's pretty well protected. Water isn't going to run off very easy. Wind isn't going to blow it off easily. And so, we've got planting equipment now that'll handle high residue situations much better than the older equipment did. So, there are herbicides, Jeanne will cover that too, that will handle this kind of situation where tillage is just not necessary anymore. This just shows you some residue. So sunflowers really are not a high residue crop. This is 2,500 pounds per acre residue out there. It was taken, I took this picture in March. So the producer did the right thing. You leave your stubble stand over winter. The only correction I'd make to this is plant into wheat stubble. He tilled it fully before he planted into sunflowers, and that really is not necessary anymore. And I think it was probably a function of his planter may not have been able to handle the wheat stubble. But today with a set of trash holders, you can clear a path for a seedbed pretty easily. So regarding rotation strategies, we grow a lot of grasses out here. We've got wheat, corn, milo, they're all in the grass family. Sunflower is in the broadleaf side. And so we're having lots of trouble in our cornfields with corn rootworm. Introducing a broadleaf crop into that rotation will address that corn rootworm issue nicely. And so that's just one of the strategies we use out here. There are some other crop options as well. So there are times when wheat is failed over the winter because of cold temperatures or too dry or blowing soil or something. And so we have went back into those failed wheat acres with sunflowers, and that's worked out just fine. We also get hailstorms in June that will take a wheat crop away from us. So there's a couple of strategies there. On dry land, one strategy we'll use is fallow the hailed crop and then plant the fallow into wheat that fall. So, the other option is to go ahead and plant into the hailed out wheat, and that can work as well. And then there are double crop options. This one is particularly important south of I-70 and east of Colorado. So after wheat harvest, there are producers that will just plant sunflowers right back into that stubble and have pretty good success. So the key is to plant early hybrids because you're in the middle of growing season now. And this does work best south of I-70 and east of Colorado, where growing season is a little bit longer and the precipitation is a little bit better. So the other piece to that, and this is the only weed section I'll talk about, Jeanne will cover that later, but if you've got volunteer wheat, you need to control it. It's not going to bother the sunflowers much, but it can harbor wheat kernel mite, which can then jump on the wheat field across the road and infect that with wheat streak mosaic virus. So that's not an issue in sunflowers. Poster selector, there are a bunch of generics out there too. So annual grass control is easy in sunflower and not expensive. So just keep that in mind. All right, this is some old data that I generated years ago, and I still use it because it still fits, it still works. University of Nebraska actually emulated this trial later on and found the same results. So, but essentially the bottom line is the later you plant, yields tend to drop. And so that's important. The other thing we did find though is planting dates from about early June and later had less insect issues. So less seed weevil and head moth problems and fewer stem boring issues as well. So that's important. We can plant early. Not many producers out here plant early anymore. For the most part, we're planting in June and we're getting along just fine. This is data from Merle Behill out of USDA ARS station at Akron, and it takes about 50 pounds of nitrogen to produce 1,000 pounds of sunflowers. And so some people use 60 pounds per 1,000 pounds of sunflowers. You know, that's kind of the range. But bottom line is Merle found his top yield, and it rained that year in Akron. He produced 2,500 pounds per acre with 60 pounds of nitrogen. Now that's not nearly enough. That 60 pounds should have raised only half that crop. So the caveat here is the previous crop was well fertilized wheat. Sunflower has a taproot that will go down below 4 feet, and it will harvest moisture and fertility down there that some of the other crops can't get. So the bottom line for when we talk fertility is soil test, know what's out there, and then fertilize accordingly. Now, I do have some producers on the irrigated ground. They've got lots of water, and they shoot for over 4,000 pounds of sunflower per acre. The new data is suggesting that nitrogen rates above 200 pounds of actual nitrogen per acre may not pay for itself. So even when they've got lots of water and high yield expectations, I'm counseling folks to say, to let them know that 200 pounds of nitrogen is probably going to be enough. And then the other new research coming out is phosphorus responses. So the data is suggesting if your soils are testing medium or better in phosphorus levels, phosphorus may not pay for itself. And so it is only the low testing phosphorus soils that you need to add phosphorus to. So that can save you a little bit of fertilizer money as well. Let's move over to insects and insecticides. So this data is out of North Dakota State University. You know, they've got 1 million acres or more up there, and so they have a lot of insects to control, more than we do, in fact. So I make it simple for folks. I tell folks there are really 4 bugs that bother us at bloom time, and we control them at the same time and with the same products. So the 4 insects we are concerned with are sunflower moth, banded sunflower moth. We've got the red seed weevil, and we have the gray seed weevil as well. Now I've got 2 crossed out here that are problematic from the northern plains, lygus bug and sunflower midge. We'll see them once in a while, but not at action levels where we need to control them. So bottom line is these are at bloom bugs, and that's when we control them. And if you see your sunflower field looking like this, it's time to get serious about scouting, finding out what levels of insects you have out there, and treat them if you need to. So the reason we say that is sunflowers can go from looking like this, and 4 or 5 warm days later, they'll be at full bloom. If this is the first time you're spraying them, this is too late, because the strategy should be to control the adults before they lay very many eggs. So at this point, you're going to control adults just fine, but the eggs they've laid will hatch, develop into larvae, and the larvae feed on the seeds, and that costs you money. So make sure when you get to this point, you're ready for insect control if you need it. We'll talk just a little bit about what they look like and economic thresholds as well. I get calls during the summer saying, my gosh, I've got all kinds of bugs in my sunflowers. I don't know what to do. And my answer to that is the ones you see are not the problem insects. It's the ones you don't see that are the troublesome ones. So these are, they're just pollinators. So there's probably 3 or 4 kinds of bees on here. The yellow and black ones are soldier beetles. They're just feeding on the pollen. And there's data that suggests that pollinators increase yield because they cross-pollinate sunflowers, and yield are bumped up as a result of that. Now, the data out there is suggesting 10 to 30% increases because of pollinators. I think we're more in the 10% range versus the 30%. But regardless, pollinators don't hurt sunflowers, they only help them. So this is a gray seed weevil, and you can see they're hidden back in there. They're small, they're not showing themselves, and they don't like to because predators can get to them when they come out. And so that's a gray seed weevil. There's a red seed weevil. Okay. Again, you'd have to look for them, find them, and then count them on each plant to see if they're at economic thresholds. The easiest way to scout for seed weevils is to walk up to one of the open sunflower heads. And I just take my thumb and brush it around about 3 circles, and they'll back out. You can also get them to back out with DEET, or if you blow cigar smoke in there, they'll back out as well. This particular head has 3 seed weevils on it. So the economic threshold for oil type sunflowers is about 5 to 7, depending on price and yield potential. So we're below economic thresholds for oil type. The economic threshold for seed weevil in confection sunflowers is 1 per head, and so we're there. And so if you're scouting a number of heads and you're averaging 3, that's an action threshold that you need to spray for. All right, that there is one of the moths that are problematic for us. That's a flower head moth, and then there's another one, a banded flower head moth, that's just a little bit smaller than this. But you can see they're not large in size, and those adults now are going to feed on that pollen, lay eggs, and the adults don't do the damage, but the developing larvae are the ones that eat into the seeds and cost you some money. The bug to the lower right is just a soldier beetle, so he's just a pollinator. Okay, there are pheromone traps for the head moths. You can get them at Gamblers or some of the other places. The pheromone's located on top. This is just a cleaned out milk jug. We've cut a hole, a window on the other side. Inside is a 50-50 mixture of water and antifreeze. Bugs then fly into that trap. They get caught and we can count them. And so that's an easy way to scout for head moths. Okay, so what do you use? The good news is there are all kinds of insecticides available and they all work. And I've got Lorsban crossed off here because Lorsban is no longer available to use in any crop. And so Lorsban's out of the picture, but there's a bunch of other ones that work just fine. This is a newer one, Rynoxapyr. So DuPont had it, they sold it to FMC. So FMC has Rynoxapyr now. And FMC has actually changed the formulation. So the old formulation was called Preventative, and that was labeled at 14 ounces per acre. The new formulation has the same active ingredient, but it's much stronger. So they call it Ventacor. Ventacor is labeled at 1 ounce per acre, 1 to 2. And so it's a lot stronger, you use a lot less, works just as good, same active ingredient. The restricted entry interval for Rynoxapyr is 4 hours, which is pretty safe. And you can see it's pretty safe on lacewings, ladybird beetles, predatory bugs, predatory mites. It's a really safe product to work with. It also works best on larvae. So that means we're controlling head moths with this one. It's a little weaker on seed weevils. But just keep in mind, Preventative is now Ventacor. So this is out of North Dakota State University, and the bottom line here is everything's working so far. The blue tall line is the percent damaged seeds from the untreated check. Everything else has decent control. So what I tell folks is when you're controlling insects and sunflowers, you don't have to go with the highest price product. The cheaper ones also work. Now there's new data out of South Dakota State University that is suggesting that there is some efficacy issues with seed weevils and permethrins. So we'll see if that holds. I just don't know that we're going to have that trouble down here. We might, but the bottom line is if you're spraying sunflowers every year, rotate your products and families as far as insecticides go. This is just some data I generated with Ventacor, and it works very well for head moths. It's a little weaker on seed weevils. So we also have other insects that bother sunflowers. These are stem boring. There are really two. There's a Dectes and then there's a stem weevil. And we really don't have an insecticide that'll work on these anymore because you need something that's systemic and will get inside the stalks. And so the bottom line is if you've got stem boring insects that are bothering your sunflower fields, plant later. It looks like planting dates from about mid-June and later will greatly decrease the incidences of Dectes and stem weevil. All right, so just keep in mind we're 30 to 40 days from physiological maturity from this point. And so in about 2 weeks, these sunflowers will drop those yellow ray petals. And in about 10 days to 2 weeks after that, heat dependent, they will be at physiological maturity. Now, when they're at physiological maturity, they're not ready to harvest yet. They're 35% moisture. So what moisture do we harvest them at? Bottom line is they need to be about 10%. And they combine nicely at 10%, and the elevators will take them at 10%. I think they have cutoffs at around 11 and higher. They really don't want them, but at 10% they'll take them all. So at 10%, the picture on the top shows intact heads coming out of that combine. That's really how you want them. You'll get the smallest amount of trash, less seed damage, and less dockage when you can combine them that way. Now, sunflowers dry fast, and so they'll go from 10% to below 8% quickly. The picture on the bottom is about 5% sunflower seeds. And what happens is if you don't make adjustments to the combine, you'll get pulverized heads, you'll get a lot more trash in the bin, there's seed shattering that will occur, and then harvest losses that will occur. And then lots of times at 5% moisture sunflowers, combine fires can be an issue. So you combat that with harvesting them wetter, so get them at 10%. And then the other piece to that regarding fires and combines is just make sure that you're cleaning the engine compartments off a couple of times a day. So that's important. The other thing too is if you're getting sunflower heads coming out, beat up out of the back of your combine, if they're coming out in pieces, slow the cylinder down, open the concave clearance, and increase the air, trying to clean them up a little bit. If you don't, you're going to get seeds like the picture on the left where this is 60% dock. And if you bring in a sample with 60% dock, the elevators are going to have a hard time accepting that. So again, just pull the cylinder down, open the concave up, increase the air, you can get them down to 6% dock relatively easy. Okay, if you don't have the Sunflower magazine or are not getting it, it's available without cost to you. It's published 6 times a year. Production and market stories are there. They actually sent a journalist down here in the fall of the year, and so there are times in that Sunflower magazine we're reading about High Plains sunflower producers. What are their strategies? What's working? What's not? The way to get it, the best way is to just get up on the website sunflowernsa.com, and I'll show that website again later, 2 slides later, and you can order it up there. The other way to get it is to get a hold of Jeanne or myself. We can get you signed up to get that thing. So if you're not getting it, it's a really good piece of information. The other thing, that sunflowernsa.com website has all the data. So Jeanne and I and the other researchers, when we publish, we send it to the National Sunflower Association. And so you can read about herbicides, insecticides, varieties, plant breeding. There's just a lot of good information up there, good technical information. All right, I'll summarize this. So regarding fertility, soil tests, what you've got there, set yield goals that are realistic. And then nitrogen, 150 pounds of nitrogen is enough to grow 3,000 pounds of sunflowers. So keep that in mind. Phosphorus levels, 30 pounds per acre on low testing soils. But if they're medium or better, testing as far as phosphorus goes, you may not need any. In our set loam soils, we don't use potassium, but sandy soils might need it. So again, test, know what's there, and fertilize accordingly. I've got micros with a question mark. So in my research, I have yet to find a response to micronutrients in sunflower. but that doesn't mean they don't work. So what I tell folks is do a check strip out there, put some micros down, and let the combine tell you whether or not they paid for themselves. Stand established, plant 2 inches deep. Use the smallest size seed you can get. We've always had better stands with smaller sized seed, so that's not as important for oils, but very important for confections. Control insects, so 10% bloom. That's 1 plant in 10 that is the best time to spray them. So now that's that's the ideal time. And so if you can't get a pilot there, if you're spraying early at 5% or later at 20%, you're still in the window, and that would still be just fine. And then harvest as close to 10% as possible. Okay, I think that's what I've got. I've got websites up there. If you need yield data, if you Google CS crops, K-State puts theirs under agronomy.kstate.edu. Yield data is up there. The National Sunflower Association website will also have yield data as well. So with that, Jeannie, thanks for all your hard work on this thing. I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay, guys, if anyone has questions, we can sure field some questions here before we move into the weed control section. So if you have questions, you can put them down into the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question that way. Either way will work fine, and we'll spend just a few minutes here going over any type of questions that anyone might have, and then we will move into weed control. So Ron, I guess I have one question for you. I know at one point you mentioned the small seed size, and you were talking, smaller seed size. Is that related to the amount of moisture they need to absorb in order to start their germination process?
I think so. Yeah, we just always have better stands with smaller seed, and I think that large seed's got a great big woody hull to it. I think it just takes more moisture to start the germination process. And so, yeah, I tell folks small size. We've just always had better stands.
Good deal. And Ron, there is a question in the chat box. It says, do you have any insight for sunflower lecthin?
Oh boy.
Ithin.
Yeah, I don't. So that may be one of the fats in the oil, and I just don't have any expertise in oils as far as specific.
So
oils.
Jeannie and Ron, that would be, sometimes you have like soybean lecithin or sunflower lecithin. I'm not sure it's really a protein material, but I see Mike Williams is on here for Red River. So Mike, you might have a better answer for any of us here.
Thanks, Calvin. I was thinking you might have an answer for us.
Yeah, I was sure hoping Calvin had the answer, because I don't.
I'll get right on it, okay?
I know that there is lectine out there. I know there are companies that refine that product to use the lectine, but I know very, very little about it.
It's a byproduct that comes out with the gums in the degumming step. We don't remove any of it, but it's just it's a product that's gaining popularity and value. So I mean, it's something that we may look at in the future.
Great. Good deal. Thank you for everybody who is chiming in on that part of the discussion. So any other questions that folks have for us to maybe not answer, but at least bat around a little bit? Okay, then with that, if you guys do have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. Ron will be on with us during this whole webinar. And so if you have questions, you can send them directly to Ron, or you can put them in the chat box to everyone. And Ron or anybody else who's on here, Calvin, Mike, Kevin, any of you guys could sure chime in on answering those also. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box and we'll go from there. Ron.
Jeannie, I just see another one in the box.
Okay.
Any suggestions for pill bug eating small sunflowers as they are coming up? So if they show themselves on top of the soil, then yes, pyrethrins will get after them. That's probably the best remedy. And I think they're surface feeders. I don't think they feed below the ground. We do have wireworms that will feed below the ground. That makes it more difficult to get after them. But, I would make sure that if you're losing stand to surface feeding bugs, pill bugs could be one of them. There's cutworms as well. The pyrethrins will get right after them.
Okay, so yes, thank you. That's a good question on pill bugs, because sometimes you do see them out there, especially under where it seems to be where you have lots of residue in fields. Those seem to be where I tend to notice them, I guess. So okay, so we're going to switch gears and move right into weed control. And so I'm going to share my screen here, and we will jump right into talking about weed control in sunflowers. So weed control in sunflowers is something that we tend to get many questions on, and it's because sometimes weed control can be kind of challenging in sunflowers. And so we're going to quickly go through some discussion on some current research, some other just general discussion on getting weed control in sunflowers. So if dynamite is your method for integrated weed management, we may need to have a little bit more of a discussion on this. This always kind of makes me chuckle, because there's times when you're dealing with some of these weeds, especially Palmer amaranth, that it seems like it would be way easier to just get rid of everything and start over. So we are not going to talk about weed dynamite in our integrated weed management programs today, though. So, okay. Preventative weed management, that is really the key for keeping weeds under control in sunflowers. We never want to see them. And this is not a new concept. We talk about this in all of our crops. We don't want it to emerge. So we need to have a plan of attack in order to prevent any weed emergence. And so that includes an early spring treatment, which would be a treatment right about now. It also includes a pre-application with a burn down and a residual herbicide, and potentially a post-emergence application also. And so while that sounds like a lot, hopefully if we have good pre-applications, we won't need to be thinking about our post-application for weed control. And I'm going to put our plug in for our K-State Chemical Weed Control Guide. This is I feel like a really good resource. I have a copy here on my desk that I use all the time. That we do have a sunflower section as part of that chemical weed control guide. I'll have a link here at the end so you guys can go and download the online version. You can also go to any of your extension offices and pick it up, or if you're not in Kansas, let me know and I'll get one in the mail to you, because they're a good reference to have. They are free. We hand them out to everybody because we just want you to have the data that you need for planning your herbicide programs. Okay. When we talk about our early spring control in March, we're talking about controlling winter annuals. So we need something that is going to take care of what we have out in the field. Glyphosate or paraquat is probably not the most attractive to be putting on, and glyphosate when in short supply may be something that we're not so excited about putting on at this stage in the game. Now, you could put on Valor, which is flumioxazin. That's a 30-day pre-harvest interval to going to sunflowers, or Elevore, which is at least 14 days prior to planting. So both of these will give us some control on horseweed, mare's tail, henbit, some kochia, some other things. So both of those are an option for an early season control of what we have out in the field. Now, we're also going to be thinking about our pre-emergence application. This is the one that we really have to have in place to help us get into good sunflower weed control. Okay, well, there's a couple at the top, sonolane and treflan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them because we don't use those very often because of the incorporation needs that we have with them. Truly, our heavy lifters on sunflower weed control include sulfentrazone, which is Spartan, S-metolachlor, which is dual magnum, pendimethalin, which is our Prowl, and peroxysulfone, which you guys may know as Zidua. So those are really our critical products will be used in pre-emergence application and sunflower weed control. Okay, as we are moving forward, when we see sulfentrazone, the claim to fame with sulfentrazone are Spartan or Authority are the name brands for sulfentrazone. It goes after pigweeds. Specifically, it does a really nice job on Palmer amaranth. I've never seen Palmer amaranth, preventing it from coming up. It also has some activity on kochia and other broadleaves. It does not have any grass control with sulfentrazone. So when we're looking at needing grass control, we look at the S-metolachlor, which has many generic products out on the market, or the pendimethalin or the Prowl. So in many cases, we're looking at a Spartan dual tank mix or a Spartan Prowl tank mix. And then when we're talking about Zidua, we're talking about grasses and small seeded broadleaves. Probably I would not leave Spartan out of a mix when we have Zidua with it. Now you might notice I have the KIH 485, that's Kumii 485. You may have heard us talk about this product, the Zidua product, when we were testing it, because we did a lot of testing at K-State and several other universities, and we called it KIH 485. And so that is that product that has become Zidua now, or the pyroxasulfone. So the other thing is there's lots of premixes on the market related to sunflowers. Many of those have these products that we're talking about in them. And so we have the Authority Edge, Authority Supreme. Authority Supreme has a slightly higher amount of the Zidua in it than Authority Edge does. We have the premix of sulfentrazone and S-metolachlor. That's the Broadax product. Spartan, Authority Elite. We have Spartan Charge, which is sulfentrazone, or Spartan plus carfentrazone. You may know that as AIM. And then we have another down here with Zidua, with Zidua and AIM together on that to make Anthem Flex. So I just wanted you to know you may hear other names, but that is our premixes that have those very key products in them. Okay, so when we talk about products that have residual control, all of those that we just spoke about have residual activity. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about some research that we have had here at K-State. Well, I say K-State, but it's actually across many areas here in the High Plains. And so this is some research we just completed the first year on. And we have, let me switch my pointer here so you guys can see what I'm pointing at. So we have dryland locations at Akron and Hayes. We have irrigated locations. I had the one at Tribune and we had one at Scotts Bluff. What this is looking at is the influence of cover crops and how they interact with our herbicides with residual activity. So what we had was plots with cover and no cover. Within those plots, we had 2 termination timings, and that is when we applied these following herbicides. So the termination timings were early May and late May. So those products were applied at that stage. We had Roundup in order to control the wheat that was out there, because our cover crop was planted to wheat. So we had Roundup to control our wheat, and then we had 2 of our herbicide products with residuals was Authority Supreme and Broadax. And so Authority Supreme, remember, is our Spartan plus wow, how can your mind just completely go blank here? We had, okay, Spartan Supreme, which is sulfentrazone, so Spartan and Zidua, and then we had the Broadax, which was Spartan plus Dual 2 Magnum. So those 2 products that we had in a premix to go out with it. So we're going to quickly look through some of this data just because I want you to understand what we were looking at here. Okay, here is our information on our weed density at Akron. Akron is one of the dryland locations. So we have down here at the bottom our cover versus no cover. And we counted the number of weeds in a meter squared. So picture a yardstick laid out in a right angle. And so that square area is where we are counting the weeds from. What you'll notice here on our first termination timing, so here's with the cover crop or with no cover crop, we're not seeing a lot of difference here. We're seeing the weed density here with just glyphosate, where we have more weeds showing up both here on cover and over here on no cover. So we're seeing weeds showing up because we don't have a residual herbicide out there to help suppress them. Also, at this stage, our cover isn't very large or isn't very tall when we are doing the termination of it. So know that we don't have not very a whole lot of cover on the soil, and we are having weeds coming up because there's no residual activity with it. Okay, what we can really start to see is here on the second termination timing. So on the cover crop, we're not seeing any weeds coming up, whether we have a residual herbicide out there or not. Over here where there is no cover, which means there is no wheat residue out there, we're seeing our weeds coming up, and even with residual herbicide, we're still seeing some weeds breaking through. I think we have some differences on when we were not catching rain. Basically, I don't think we caught a lot of rain in Akron last year to get some of these herbicides activated. And so we have some interesting things going on in this study just because of the timing of rainfall, knowing when we're having getting the herbicides activated and when we're having a flush of weeds coming up. Okay. Sorry, I skipped one thing. These weeds were probably already up at application time. And so that's an important note over here on our no cover second termination timing. This would have been applied at the end of May. And so we probably already had weeds, most likely Palmer amaranth, that was up and were established when we put this product on. They were probably glyphosate resistant. And so spraying them with glyphosate didn't have any effect on whether they were there or not. Okay, so percent weed control, what we're seeing here is reflection of what we were seeing for weed biomass. Over here on no cover crop, our weed control was down like 65% over here because we had nothing to really hold those weeds back. Even after we put the residual herbicide on, we probably stopped some, but there were already weeds established out there in the plots. On the other three bars here, we had 90 to probably 98% control on all of those just because we weren't seeing a lot of weeds. When we're rating for weed control, we look at first the number of weeds, but also the size of weeds. So it's a little bit, I hate to say subjective because we get used to how we go through and rate plots, but we are seeing some differences showing up here on that. Okay, so this is at the Scotts Bluff location. This is an irrigated trial. What you'll notice first thing, and maybe the first thing that you noticed that I did, is all of these ratings here where we have nearly 100% weed control. So here in our first termination timing, we're seeing residual herbicides really doing the heavy lifting here. And so even with a cover crop in our first termination, we're seeing nearly 100% control on both of these with the residual herbicide. We're seeing the same thing over here on no cover crop. So the residual herbicides are what are really helping us. When we're looking at our second termination timing, so the end of May, we're seeing that the herbicides, when we have glyphosate in there, we are getting good control. And then as we're moving through the growing season, we have diminished amount of control. So we're still having some weeds that are growing out there and that are causing us less and less weed control, because as we go down, we're having less weed control showing up here. The interesting thing that I don't know if I completely understand, well, I think I do, but we have 2 weeks after treatment right here on our second termination, and this is this case here with cover crop and with no cover crop, that we are seeing pretty good weed control right here at 2 weeks after treatment, and then we're seeing that kind of drop off after as we move forward through the growing season. So our weeds are still out there growing. There is a little bit of a question on if we are getting some of our residual herbicide caught in residue and getting it washed off? Is it kicking in just a little bit later through the growing season? So a couple of things that we're still working out as we're looking at some of this data. The other thing you'll notice is where we have glyphosate just by itself at the first termination timing, just very, very poor weed control. So we are having weeds out there just really growing, and it's doesn't get any better as we go through the growing season. So just kind of interesting data, I think. The key thing with these in the cover or no cover under irrigated is that we don't necessarily have as much of a factor when we have when we have the ability to get our irrigation on, to get our herbicides activated, to get weeds up and get them growing, and we are supplementing our crop for any moisture that was taken out by our cover. And so kind of, under irrigation is probably where this fits the best, because I think one of the key things we're missing out of this data at this point is our water use, because that's a huge, huge concern for me on dryland and actually on irrigated also. Okay, we'll just kind of skip over this because I'm running a little short on time here. This is just showing that we have higher a number of weeds where we don't have any residual herbicide out there to help suppress them. Okay, here's just a quick look at the plots at Scotts Bluff. So this is no cover crop, glyphosate only. And so you can see all the Palmer amaranth. There's also some lamb's quarter out there in this plot too. You can kind of see some of these leaves that are shaped like lamb's quarter leaves. So some other pressure out there, but really good healthy weed population that they had at this location. Here is the mid-May terminated cover crop. You can notice there is some residue on the soil surface, but not a ton. This was taken the first part of July, but this is Roundup plus Broadaxe, so Spartan plus Dual. And then here at the end of May, terminated cover crop. And so we're seeing quite a bit more residue out here on the soil surface to help suppress weeds. The whole thing with using cover crops for suppressing weeds is that we want to keep them in the dark. Dark is a great herbicide to help suppress our weed pressure. Okay, we'll skip over this because we've talked about this real quick on our post herbicides. We have two that are herbicide tolerant, Beyond and Express. We need to manage our expectations if we are going to plan on these helping us with weed control, because we have to catch our weeds when they are very small. We cannot be going after weeds that are 6 inches or taller. We need 3 inches or less to feel like we can get good weed control on them. They will not control ALS resistant pigweeds or kochia, and we know we have a pretty good population of ALS resistant Palmer amaranth around, so know that. These are also not cross resistant, so do not mix up which you have out in the field if you have that as a rescue type of treatment in mind. We have good grass weed control options, clethodim, clozalifop, and sethoxydim. So Select, Assure, and Post do a nice job on getting grass cleaned up. And Ron mentioned that when we're talking about volunteer wheat coming underneath our sunflowers, especially if we're in a situation with double crop sunflowers. Okay, Zidua can be applied post. We can put it on from the V1 to V8 stages. It does a pretty nice job of having broad spectrum control, no activity on any weeds that are already up. We looked at some research looking at overlapping residuals. So as our residual is is declining in its efficacy, to put on another application of herbicide with residue to kind of give it a boost and extend our weed control. Okay, this is some research that I had in Colby here a couple of years ago. We have some follow-up data on it, but this has approximate costs on it, so that's why I shared this slide. But you can see even 8 and 10 weeks after treatment, Broadaxe as a pre, or Broadaxe with a post, an early post 2 weeks after, 4 weeks after, or 6 weeks after, gave us really good weed control clear out here to 10 weeks after emergence. And so this is 10 weeks after those sunflowers come up. So the Zidua can give us season-long weed control by itself, but then we might be able to improve that just a little bit if we go in and put a late application of, or a later application of Zidua on up to that V5, V8 stage. Okay, why would you want to be planning on this? If you have a situation where you have a poor stand of sunflowers and you feel like Palmer are going to be coming up through it, that's a reason to use Zidua. If you have a hail that opens up the canopy, that's another good reason for putting Zidua on post. If you have a field where you have a Palmer amaranth problem and know it, or if part of the field does, that's a good reason. And if you're in a field with unknown history, you don't know what's going on or what the weed pressure has been in the past, that is this, these are the situations for a sequential Zidua treatment. The reason being why we would want all these that have in common is high weed pressure or an open canopy. Both of those are problems when we think about weed control. Okay, summary, get a plan in place, start clean and stay clean. So start clean and prevent any weed emergence. Pre's are a critical part of this. Broadax, Spartan Charge show better weed control than Prowl by itself in some of our research, but in many cases, a tank mix with sulfentrazone with Spartan is an important component of keeping Palmer amaranth at bay. Protect the yield with early season control. We know that sunflowers are not very competitive early in the season, and our post options are limited. I actually looked it up, and there's like 3 post-emergence products in our herbicide, or 6 in our herbicide guide, and 3 of those are just for grass control. So not a lot of options later in the season. Zidua really is that option. Okay, so that's the end. Here is my contact information. If you are needing CCA credits, go ahead, pull out your phone and use your scanner to scan in and get your CCA credits for Ron's presentation and mine. You can get a hold of me at basically the Northwest Area Extension Office in Colby, which is on the experiment station. You can follow me on Twitter or send me an email. I'm happy to get those answered. With that, let me see if we have, Ron, can you see the chat box? Can you tell me if we have questions on weed control, or maybe we should just keep moving? Oh, wow, I was way longer than I thought I was. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you're good. No questions on weed control so far.
Awesome. Okay. So I will stop sharing mine and we will move directly into the next step here. Sorry about that, guys. I was way longer than I thought. Okay, now, Kevin, we are ready to move to you. Are you going to share your screen, or do you want me to share it from my side?
Go ahead and share it if you'd like.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, so Kevin Swanson is joining us. Kevin is a member of the High Plains Sunflower Committee. He is with Colorado Mills. And so we thought they would be a great discussion partner here on talking about our marketing opportunities. So Kevin, we are ready to roll.
Hello everybody. I'm Kevin Swanson with Colorado Mills, and we're a processor of sunflowers. We purchase the sunflowers direct from the farmers. We crush the seed to make a crude oil. We take that oil then to the next step and run it through a refining process where it makes a finished product, so it's ready for cooking oil use and snack food companies, companies that are baking products. That's a good high lake sunflower oil for the vegetable oil markets. And I just wanted to touch upon the opportunities that we have right now for current contracting. So we're looking for the high lake sunflower varieties. When you're out purchasing your seed, the high lake or New Sun are the 2 varieties that are out there, and we're preferring the high lake. Right now, our bid delivered for Lamar on our acre contract is 32, 40, 100. And we offer a grower loyalty program. So for each year you grow for us and contract with us, we add 20 cents to that base price. up to 5 years, so you can get up to $1 premium. We have 2 other receiving points that we take sunflowers in. We have Bethune, Colorado that works with us to take seeds. And then we have a Walsh, Colorado location right now working with us also. And our acre contract delivery there is $31.90 is what we're offering, plus the grower loyalty program. I've already touched on the grower loyalty program, but I can answer any questions later if anybody's got questions on that. Our price is based on the 40% oil content. When the seeds test higher than 40%, we pay a premium. There is a discount if they go under 40. Ultimately, the price of the oil is the highest priced product in there, so that ultimately helps set that price. We do it on an acre contract basis, which is like an act of God contract. We accept the seeds that are harvested off the acres that are contracted with us. So if you contract 100 acres and they produce whatever the production is that you harvest, you can bring in against that contract, and that's what we pay on. We also offer the opportunity if you want to do it on a percentage basis. Like I have some growers that'll do 25% 4 different times during the growing season, so they can maybe participate on some up or down in the market. And then we average that all together once they do their finish their 100% production contracting with us. And we also honor that as an act of God contract. And for producers that have on-farm storage that would like to cut them, put them in their bins and then bring them to us at a later date, or bag them and bring them to us at a later date, we have an on-farm storage program where we pay the producers 25 cents a hundred a month to store them for us and deliver them at a later date. I guess that program, we started at midpoint of harvest, and then we end that program on the delivery date when it's delivered to our end location. I have myself and Kent Witt listed on the bottom. We're both here in the Lamar office. And we have Mike Bretz also, who lives in Goodland, Colorado, that works with us, and his information is on there also. Anybody have any questions for me?
Hey, Kevin, Ron here. Let's say you've got a loss. Is it as simple as giving you a call saying, I got hailed last night?
Yes, that's that's what we're asking. You know, if you have an adverse cropping event like hail, just let us know so we can adjust our expectations on what we're anticipating your yield to be. And if it's bad enough, we go along with whatever your insurance company tells you to do. So if they tell you it's a complete failure, we go along with their estimation.
Kevin, I have a question for you also on the on-farm storage. Do you call guys and tell them when you're ready for the sunflowers, or do they call you and say, hey, we need to move sunflowers? How does that work?
Sure, it works both ways. I start talking to guys after harvest, kind of start winding down on what their expectations are and when they want to start moving them. So this year, for example, I had a few guys start in December. I had quite a few start in January. I have a few that are starting next month. So we work with them on just what works for them on the farm, and when they have trucks available. I have a few that trickle them in every time they have a opening. They'll load up a load of seeds and bring to us. So we're pretty flexible on how we're working with the growers on that.
Good deal. Thanks so much. If anyone else has questions for Kevin, go ahead and put them in the chat box. I will post this information on our K-State Sunflower District Agronomy website where you guys went to register to attend this webinar. So Kevin's contact information will be on there. So if you want to follow up with him, we'll sure have that available for you. Okay, so with that, thanks, Kevin, for following up with all of that. Our last speaker today is Mike Williams. Mike is with Red River Commodities, and Mike is also going to be talking about market opportunities and delivery points and prices and all those things along that line. So Mike, I think, do you have a screen that you want to share, or do you have something you want me to put up?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to Jeannie for putting this together. She's always been very willing and very cordial. When we ask her to do something, she jumps right out there. I don't know whether you're calving right now or not, Jeannie. It seems like everybody's calving right now. So if you are, thank you for taking the time to come do this.
Well, we are calving, but you'll know I am in my office in Colby, not at home with my husband with calving season, and that might have been by design. I didn't know when I picked this day that we'd have nasty.
Yeah, I am actually sitting in Denver, just north of Denver, in a hotel room, and it started raining here yesterday afternoon, and it snowed most of the night and snowed most of the day. Just quit snowing about an hour and a half ago, and it's very heavy, wet snow. So for those that live in this area, boy, it's a good snow for you, and hopefully it does well. Confection sunflowers is what Red River Commodities, who I work for and represent. I like to believe that I represent the sunflower growers. Whether you're growing for Red River, you're growing for Kevin at Colorado Oil, or you're calling for any other organization that might be contracting or buying bird seed or different things. We promote sunflowers. We think sunflowers is a good crop for the farmers to have in their program, and it makes a great rotation crop for growers. So I'm going to talk a little bit about confections to start with. We are a confection processor for the snack food industry. We process for Frito-Lay, we actually control the seed from the planting seed all the way to the package. We produce the planting seed, we contract the production fields with the growers, and then we actually clean and roast the sunflower seeds for Frito-Lay. Lubbock, Texas processes all the Frito-Lay product that goes to the stores for sale. In our Horace, North Dakota, or Fargo, North Dakota, Horace is just a bar, and a sunflower plant, roasting plant, we roast and process seeds for Spitz and Biggs. So they're both Pepsi-owned companies. So all the Pepsi product that is produced under the three brands comes through our organization. Other companies supply the seed for the program. For example, Schooler also supplies some of the seed for the Spitz product. So we all kind of work together to do that. Markets are changing, and they're just constantly changing. I feel for you, all the farmers out there, because of the way the corn prices have changed, soybeans have changed. Wheat is a rocket up and a bomb coming down. So sunflowers are trying to hang in there with the markets. Currently, insurance values are 40-50 if you're talking about insurance. Sunflowers are starting to move up in value. They're probably hanging a little above 40 cents now for confections. They are on a grade of above 22.64. Everything gets gets the split price of 40 plus, and everything below will get the bottom price. The market has demand. During COVID, and I know we're all tired of hearing about COVID, but during COVID, sales shrunk 30%. Nobody was traveling. They cut down eating sunflowers at baseball games. Any outdoor event that was on artificial turf did not like for you to eat sunflower seeds. Here in the U.S., we take a handful, stick them in our mouth, and spit them. So during COVID, that was kind of frowned upon, and probably should be frowned upon anyway. But that's kind of how that market has been and going. But so market's making a comeback. We're adding sales pretty constant and increasing, but we're still got a ways to go. But there is demand. Also, the overseas market that we sell a percentage of the crop into Spain had some difficulties due to COVID. Same way, they have a lot of street vendors that roast on the streets, and when you make everybody stay home, that product doesn't get roasted, and there's not the street vendors. So that market suffered a little bit too. Coming back, all these markets are coming back. Another thing at Red River, we also we contract bird food, oil seeds for bird seed. For us, it doesn't matter what oil it is, whether it's Linoleic, New Sun, or Howlec. We honestly, we tell growers, if you have Howlec and you're close to Kevin, go to Kevin. If you have New Suns, we'll buy the New Suns. But we've been telling people to go to Colorado Mills because they have a little bit higher value for the Howlec, especially with oil content. But we do use quite a bit of oil seeds, and we do offer grower contracts. We're contracting in the Texas area for oil seeds. We're contracting a little bit in Colorado and a little bit in Kansas, not a lot, but we do in spots. You heard Ron talk about con oils. And con oils is exactly what it says it is. It's a confection and oilseed cross. The male parent is the confection, and the female is the oilseeds. So you develop a little bit smaller seed to plant. The reason the product was developed originally was because we were working with some breeders ourselves, and we have a product called Sun Butter, and we figured out that the D-hull, the ability to remove the hulls from the kernel and separate them, was a lot easier to do on the con hull type hybrids, and you got a higher return on that. Plus, the oils that were developed that were in there, and quite by accident, wasn't intention, but ended up being on the bottom side of Howlec. Howlec starts at 80% of lake value, and most of the cons will run in the high 70s to maybe 81 every once in a while. So we found that product works very well in the making of our Sun Butter product. So in our North Dakota operation, we contract con oils, particularly for our Sun Butter product. We don't contract the con oils in the southern part, especially Texas, because of peanuts. Sun Butter is a peanut, tree nut free product. So we grow it in areas that do not grow peanuts. And we actually have our truckers, even though there's not peanuts grown in Colorado that I know of yet, Ron, we still have our truckers sign affidavits that they're not hauling peanuts, because how severe the allergens can be for somebody that digests an allergen from peanuts. So we try to make sure that's free. I'm open for questions on any of these products, on markets. I did not put out a flyer or anything, but those that have a pen and a pencil, I'll give you my email address. It's Mike W at Redriv, REDRIV.com. And if you have any questions that we don't answer here, or you any other information you might want, drop me an email. Right now, it's about the easiest way to get a hold of me because I'm moving around so much right now. But look forward to working with some of you. And each and every one that are growing sunflowers, I wish you the best. And I always tell people, be safe. Everything we do out there in agriculture can be dangerous. So always be safe. Always be safe. Like for you to go home to see your family at the end of the day.
Hey, Mike, Ron here. Con oils, are they contracted only?
We do contract them up north, and there are growers that will grow them open, especially where sunflowers are predominantly grown in the Dakotas. There are a few growers that grow them open, Ron, but not very many. It's a pretty specialized market, as you can tell. We buy them. There's a couple other companies that buy them, even though they're used for other places.
There's a comment in the chat. Do you expect the old crop sunflower market to continue to rise?
It will for a little bit, I think. And Kevin can also put input in that, but I think that as we get a little bit closer to the summer, it could rise just a little bit. Confections right now are have definitely risen some. There's a need for confections right now, so if there's any open confections, there is a need. But yes, I expect them to rise a little bit more. Not tremendously, but possibly another penny or so.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it can continue to rise some too, but you got other oils that'll come into play that some people may look at too, that may start, customers may start introducing that oil instead of the higher price sunflower oil. But there is a firm demand for the Highlight sunflower oil right now, so I'm sure it's going to keep it propped up here for a while.
Okay, another question in the chat. Have producers had good results harvesting with an ARRO Milo head? So Kelvin jumped into this, but I believe that may be an all-crop header, and that's what CSU uses for their sunflower plots. It works great. If it's not an all-crop header, then I'm not familiar with it.
I'm not familiar exactly. I think that is an all-crop header, what I'd call an all-crop or a soybean header. And yes, they work fine. You tend to get a little bit more trash with them than you do with some of the pan style headers, but they do work well. One thing I'll add to what Kevin said there a minute ago about the oil seeds. People keep in mind, I know there's a war going on in Europe right now with Bulgaria or excuse me, Ukraine, which is one of the largest growers of oil seeds and the seller of oil. Keep in mind that the oil that is produced in the United States basically stays in North America. The customers are US, Mexico, and Canada, and it's very little that gets exported. What gets exported goes into Japan, but that's a pretty small percentage. So what goes on in the war doesn't affect it entirely as far as demand. There's already a good demand there. But how it does affect is just the price of commodities in general. As commodities go up, sunflowers will go up a little bit as well.
That's a very good point, Mike, because I know when you hear the Ukraine being #4 exporter or something or supplier of sunflowers, it makes you curious how that's going to affect what we have going on over here.
Yeah. United States grows 2% of the world's sunflowers. So we don't have a lot of effect on it, but we do have an effect within North America. There's a little bit of oil comes into Canada from Ukraine, and but it's very little comes in there. Yeah, Mitch, there's no confections that are exported out of Ukraine. There are some grown there. It's a little bit different style of confection than what we're used to here. It's a black shelled confection. It's solid black with no stripe on it. But it's more, they used to call them Russian peanuts, but that's more the style that's grown for confections in Ukraine. But there's not a lot of it. It's all if there is, it's all consumed within the country. Russia the same way. Russia raises some confections too, but it's all consumed within the country, not exported.
So Mike, what percentage of our confections are going overseas then from the United States?
Currently, we're probably shipping about 20% of the confections. At one time, that was considerably higher, but there again, it's through the COVID that we've gone through, so that's gone down a little bit. And at one time, there's some competition from Bulgaria, China, and Argentina that 10 years ago was not there. And all of that has came around in the last less than 10 years. From what we're hearing in Bulgaria, now for this year, we'll not be exporting confections and or other products out of Bulgaria. So the competition would come from China and or Argentina.
Okay, let's see, what else do we have for questions? Craig, I'm not sure if we completely got your question answered. If you want to unmute and ask us or tell us a little more about the ARRO Milo head, you can sure do that. I don't have a good answer for it, but if there's the rest of this group or any producer who has used it, can sure unmute and talk a little bit about your experience with it too, so. I'm not sure that's a good sign when everything goes quiet here. So, any other questions for Mike or Kevin or Ron? Or we have Calvin on with us. Calvin, I didn't introduce you, but you've been very active in the chat. Calvin is an agronomist down in Texas and works with both Ron and I on research projects occasionally. And Calvin's also a wealth of knowledge. And he was putting questions here in the chat box. Ron, I don't know if I completely followed what all Calvin was putting in, or Calvin, if you want to unmute and turn on your camera to ask questions to the group, you can sure do that too.
Well, thank you, Jeannie. They weren't necessarily so much as questions, but if any of our attendees, farmers, if you are thinking about growing sunflowers for the first time in 2022, I always have considered it a high priority to have a phone chat for about 15 or 20 minutes with the first time grower to ensure that there's some things that you know about going in. And, when I came to started my job in Lubbock in 1999, I talked to farmers and they said, oh yeah, I grew sunflowers back, and, they named the year and they said, I swore I would never do it again. Well, what happened? Tell me about your crop. And I just realized that the information might have been there, but they were not accessing it. And so, sunflower head moth has probably been the downfall of some growers. And that is something all of us would want any first time grower to know about. And then the second and third things that I had there is, for you, any of you attendees that are existing farmers, what do you need most? What information do you need the most for your 2022 sunflower crop? And then finally, we all know that nitrogen prices are really high, and the Ukraine-Russia situation is probably going to prolong that because Russia is the largest manufacturer and exporter of nitrogen fertilizer materials in the world. But I know all of us, we certainly emphasize soil testing. We think especially for sunflowers or any crop for that matter, 24-inch soil test for at least for nitrate nitrogen. That's your readily available form. That is good. That soil nitrogen that you have there has never been worth more than it is today. And so we certainly would not want to see you over fertilize in 2022 in sunflowers with their ability to capture nitrogen far deeper into the soil than most other crops we grow. Could be a real boon for a sunflower producer with these high nitrogen prices in 2022. Ron, Jeannie?
Okay, thanks, Calvin. I appreciate your closing comments on that because I think those are very applicable to what we have going on right now with this. So with that, any other questions, put them in the chat box. I'll go ahead and put up our last slide here for getting information that you guys need on sunflower production. Like Ron mentioned, if you do not have one of the High Plains Sunflower production guides, please let us know. We will get those to you and we will stick them in the mail, get them to you one way or another here. So please go ahead and put in the chat box if you want those, or just send us a note. I think everybody, as you're registering, sent me your mailing address, and so we can sure get those in the mail coming to you. So my computer is kind of froze up, so I hope you guys can see the last slide here. Okay, Ron's giving me a thumbs up. That's good. So I can't tell if it's in the right mode, but we have three credits or three QR codes on there for you. One is anyone who needs to get your CCA credits, scan that QR code to get your second half credit for the marketing portion of our of our webinar here. So scan that, it'll take you to get your credits. If you do not want to mess with scanning QR codes, email me right now with your name and your CCA number, and I'll get you on the list to make sure you get the credits for that. I also have a QR code up there for the High Plains Sunflower Production Handbook. You can download the digital version. It is housed on the K-State the K-State publications page. If you don't do QR codes, you can actually just Google High Plains Sunflower Production Guide. It'll pop up on a K-State website, and you can get it there, or send me a message and we will get the paper copy in the mail to you. The last thing that you may always feel like we ask you to do is to do an evaluation for this webinar. And I think that helps us direct us as we are doing future programming for future programming related to sunflowers and future programming related to any other type of production needs that you might have. So I'm going to go ahead and also put that link here, if I can get everything to work, into the chat box. And so you will be able to see that to go in and fill out that evaluation form. So, okay, I'll put that in. There we go. So we would really appreciate it if you guys would show or fill out that evaluation form, because that will be important for us as we are moving forward doing any other sunflower programming. So with that, Ron, is there anything else in the chat box that we need to finish up with?
Looks good so far.
Okay, good deal. So with that, I think we will go ahead and sign off for the day. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please, if you have questions, follow up with us. Calvin's correct. We want to make sure you have any questions that you might have answered before entering into growing sunflowers if it is your first time. So I think we will call an end to our sunflower webinar.
Thank you, Jeannie, for hosting.
Not
Yes.
a problem.
Thank you, Jeannie.
You're very welcome.
Yes, thank you.